What's the tea, guys? Before I even get into the card, I want you to imagine something. Imagine being a child, not grown, not political, not trying to prove a point, not trying to rebel, not trying to make a statement, just a child. You don't know much about the world yet. You're still learning language, still learning people, still learning yourself. And deep inside, something feels off. Something does not match. Something does not feel right in the way you are being seen, named, or understood. And all you really want at the most innocent level is to feel like yourself. Now, I already know what some people are going to say. God doesn't make mistakes. And maybe he doesn't. But who said difference was a mistake? Who said that every single life that comes here has to come in the same exact package for it to have purpose? Who said that every person is supposed to walk exactly down the same road, feel the exact same way, experience the same body, the same exact mind, the same exact spirit? Who decided that? If somebody's experience stretches beyond your comfort zone, it must automatically be rebellion instead of meaning. Maybe some people are born different on purpose. Maybe some people have come into this world carrying a different kind of experience on purpose. Maybe the lesson is not sameness. Maybe the lesson is acceptance. Maybe the lesson is compassion. Today's What's the Tea is spiritual hater. Hates on your spirituality, hates your spirit, hates your light, hates your magic, hates your power. Maybe the lesson is whether we can love people when their experience does not mirror our own. Because children are born with all kinds of differences. Some are born with one kidney. Some are born with visible differences. Some are born with invisible ones. And some with minds that actually work very differently, and some that their bodies develop differently. And we don't look the same. We look at every difference and say, well, that should not be. That should not exist. Sometimes maybe we are being asked to learn something deeper. So if a child is simply trying to understand who they are, trying to feel at home in themselves, trying to breathe without shame, trying to live honestly, how is our judgment helping? How is our cruelty helping? How is making them afraid helping? How is teaching them to hate themselves doing anything holy? Because if they are a loving person, a good person, a sincere person, and all they want is the freedom to live as who they truly are, how is that hurting anybody? Yeah, that's where I go. Because since I was young, I have always been surrounded by people who wanted acceptance in their own way. And honestly, so have I. Maybe not for the same reasons, maybe not around gender, but I know what it feels like to want to be understood, to want to be accepted, to want people to see your heart instead of trying to force you into who they think you should be. And I knew early on that part of my purpose is to fight bullies, to fight hate. All those people who think they're being funny using hate, and then the people laughing with them. My purpose is to challenge people who exclude others and speak up. When people try to shame somebody out of their own spirit, because somebody's spirit, that's who they are. And people need to be allowed to shine as themselves. If they are ever going to become the healthiest, fullest, most loving version of who they were created to be, and if we really believe in God, and if we really believe in love, and if maybe it's our job not to crush that spirit. Maybe our job is to protect it. And that's exactly why today's card, Spiritual Hater, hits so hard, because this one is deep. This is not just about somebody being negative. This is not just about jealousy. This is not just about somebody being judgmental in some random little way. This card is about people who claim spirituality. They claim religion. They claim Jesus. They claim morals. They claim truth. They claim righteousness. But the fruit they keep producing is judgment, shame, rejection, cruelty, fear, and control. That's the tea. Because let's be honest, a whole lot of people love to say, oh, I'm walking with God. I'm walking with God. But the second somebody different shows up, here comes the disgust. Here comes the policing. Or here comes the fake concern. Here comes the, I'm just speaking the truth. Here comes the pressure to define someone else's identity, body, pronouns, sexuality, humanity, or worth. Like they were professionally hired by heaven. Like somehow God is up there saying, yes, Brenda, thank you so much. I was actually waiting for your Facebook paragraph to finish my divine plan. My phone number was Brenda's before, so I get calls for her all day long. That's the only reason I use the name Brenda, so don't get offended. I got calls for Brenda all day this morning. Be serious. No. I am sorry, but that does not feel like love to me. That does not feel spiritual to me. That does not feel like Jesus to me. Because whether somebody believes in Jesus or not, one thing should still be simple. Constant judgment does not heal people. It wounds them. And that is one of the biggest points people keep missing. They keep acting like the evil is people being different. They keep acting like the evil is being gay. The evil is being trans. The evil is being intersex, soft, fluid, honest, visible, or free. They keep acting like the problem is that the world is becoming too accepting, too open, too woke, too willing to let people live. But what if the real evil is not people existing, What if the real evil is what chronic judgment does to the soul? What if the real evil is the shame, the fear, the anxiety, the isolation, the self-hatred, that feeling that who you are is going to cost you love, the feeling that your family, your friends, your coworkers, your classmates, your teammates, your own people are a safe place for rules than for compassion. Because that does real damage. And I mean real damage. This is not just hurt feelings. This is not just people being sensitive. This is not just everybody wants to be offended these days. No, baby. That mess, it gets in the nervous system. It gets in the body. It gets in the self-concept. Shame does not create healing. Shame creates hiding. Shame splits people in half. It teaches them that parts of themselves are only lovable if they are edited, denied, silenced, or buried. It creates anxiety, fear, depression, secrecy, people-pleasing, and inner war. And then folks have the nerve to act shocked when people are struggling. Maybe stop crushing them first. Because one of the saddest things in all of this is when people do not feel supported by their own loved ones, their own family, their own friends, their own coworkers, their own fellow students, their own team, their own circle. That is so heartbreaking. There is already enough hate and anger and division in our world. People need their people. They need to know somebody is on their side. And when strangers judge you, yeah, it hurts. But when your own people do it, oh, that cuts differently. That's the kind of pain that gets in the bones. And another thing that really needs to be said is that when parents get brainwashed by fear, doctrine, politics, or other people's opinions, that they cannot accept their own child, that is devastating. Because God gave you a child for a reason. The child did not just accidentally land in your arms one day. The soul was entrusted to you. And if your first response is not love, not curiosity, not compassion, not even trying to understand, but instead, I'm just going to pray for you while staying locked in your own rigidity, locked in your own ideology, locked in your own refusal to open your heart, then yes, that is going to destroy your relationship. And people need to stop acting confused about that. You cannot keep rejecting somebody's spirit and expect closeness. You cannot keep making someone feel like who they are is a problem and expect intimacy. And you cannot keep choosing dogma over connection and then act shocked when your child pulls away. Go silent. Stops trusting you or stops letting you in their inner world. That's not rebellion. That's heartbreak. Because love, it has to be felt to be believed. And if a child keeps hearing, I love you, but I can't accept this. No, I love you, but I'm praying you change. That does not feel like love. That feels like conditional love. That feels like being tolerated while your deepest self is put on trial. And baby, that kind of love, it does not hold at all. That kind of love fractures families. Because what so many parents do not realize is that acceptance, it does not mean you suddenly have every answer. Acceptance does not mean you understand every single thing overnight. And acceptance, it just means that your love is big enough not to abandon the relationship while you learn, while you figure things out. Acceptance means your child knows beyond all doubt, you're still mine. I'm still here for you. I'm not going to make you earn belonging in this house. That matters. And I think that if more parents understood that, maybe there would be a lot less anxiety out in this world. Less fear, less shame, less hiding, less depression, less silence sitting at the dinner table, less children growing up feeling like home is the first place they felt unsafe at. Because the truth is, when parents choose ideology over relationship, they're not protecting the family. They're breaking it. And if God gave you that child, maybe the assignment was never to control them into sameness. Maybe the assignment was to love them enough to grow. And I want to say something else too, because this is personal for me. Somebody asked earlier today, what drove you away from the church? They wanted people's opinions. And that question sat with me because I grew up in a church. I was in private school from kindergarten through 9th grade. So church, it was part of my life constantly. Not once in a while, constantly. We went more than once a week. That was part of school, part of routine, part of being raised in that environment. And then on top of that, my dad had me going to church every Sunday, no matter what. It didn't matter how we felt, how tired we were, how much we partied the day before. When we got older, we still, Sunday meant church. That's what we did. And I loved church. I loved the connection. I loved the tradition. I loved the feeling of sitting there, feeling like I was connecting one-on-one with the Lord in my own heart. That part was always so real for me. The part mattered to me. And it still matters to me today. But what drove me away from organized religion was not God. It was not Jesus. It was not prayer. It was not spirituality. It was the hypocrites, the people sitting in the church. One of my good friends invited me to his church, and I was excited. I went in open-minded, and for a while, it felt really beautiful. I felt that connection with God again. I felt community. I felt warmth. I felt like maybe, you know what, this is the place where love actually becomes alive. And then after a few times, the preacher started talking about gay people in a hateful way, not lovingly, not compassionately, not humbly, hatefully. I could feel the energy shifting. I could feel him almost trying to brainwash people into not accepting others, into judging, into seeing certain human beings as less worthy, less holy, less acceptable. I walked out because that, to me, that's not what it's supposed to be about. And you know what? I never told my friend anything. I never went back and said, hey, this needs to stop. This isn't right. I'm not going to your church ever again. They're horrible. I never did that because his connection with God is his connection with God. That's between him and God. That's none of my business. It's not my right to do that. And just like it's nobody else's right to tell somebody else that they are bigger sinners than them, or that they're doing it wrong, or somebody's doing it wrong, or that their path to God somehow is cleaner than ours. Because let's be honest, the preacher was up there hating and sinning while talking about other people. And that's between him and God. That's not up to me. But I knew I needed to not accept it because it didn't feel right. Especially when I think that maybe somebody young is sitting in there wrestling with that within themselves. And now they're being made to feel like they are worse of a person, less of a person, more broken than the one standing up there hating. That's backwards. That's what pushed me away from organized religion. The prejudice, the hypocrisy, the arrogance of people thinking church is a place where we gather to judge who is acceptable and who is not. No. That is not what faith is supposed to be. That's not what religion is supposed to be. It's supposed to be about love, connection, healing, mercy, acceptance. A place where people come to feel closer to God, not farther from themselves. And I understand that every religion has a right to believe what it believes. Everybody has a right to their own convictions. But believing something, it does not give you the right to condemn other people, humiliate them, or make their life harder. Because some people, they just want to love who they love. And some people just want to live honestly. Some people just want to breathe without shame. And when the church becomes part of a place of condemnation instead of compassion, that is exactly what drives people away. That's why so many people leave the church. Not because they don't want God, not because they don't care about spirit, not because they are evil, rebellious, or broken, but because they're tired of the hypocrites and tired of the prejudice, tired of watching people weaponize religion against human beings. And that's why I also think it matters that there are congregations growing that actually do accept people. Because where people can gather and feel seen, not attacked, love, not policed, welcomed, not measured against someone else's narrow comfort zone. And no, I'm not saying you have to go to church to have a relationship with God. I don't believe that. You can connect with God anywhere. But I think of church the way I think of making time for someone you love. Like a date. Like when you get dressed up to meet your person or go celebrate a friend's birthday and you intentionally set aside that time and say, this time's for you. That's what church should feel like. A chosen, intentional meeting with spirit. A place where the heart shows up open. But when a whole congregation, especially wealthy ones with platforms and money and influence, start pushing politics, prejudice, and hate, oh, that gets ugly fast. Because now it's no longer about God. It becomes about power, about image, about controlling minds. And then people repeat that hate. Because some billionaire pastor or platform preacher handed it to them. And wrapped in religion, that is not right. That is not right at all. let me be clear. I'm not doing this for debate. That's not what this is about. I'm not doing this because I want some big comment war. I'm doing this because I'm speaking what I feel and what I know in my heart is true for me. And if other people want to have their own debates and preach their own opinions, they can do it somewhere else. Just not on my page, not in my space, because this is my congregation. This is the acceptance building. And that is where I'm going to use my voice, my words, to spread awareness, compassion, love, and truth. And I know in my spirit, because a lot of the arguments sound the same. Oh, the world is getting more woke. They're making evil more acceptable. This is confusion. This is rebellion. This is against God's design. Baby, let's slow that all the way down, seriously. Because what if some of y'all are calling evil is the very lesson you're supposed to learn from? What if the issue is not that people are suddenly becoming this way, but that people are finally visible enough that you cannot pretend they do not exist anymore? People have always been different. Difference is real. Human beings have never been as simple and tidy as one size fits all. And some people, they want to preach. Some, maybe the real question is not, why are there more people like this? Maybe the real question is, why are more of us finally being forced to confront the fact that the people we love are not all the same? Because that's where it gets personal. In every family, there's somebody. In every community, there is somebody. In every school, every workplace, every church, every friend group, every team, there is somebody. A child, a sibling, a cousin, a friend, a teammate, a grandchild, somebody's baby. And maybe that is not a mistake. Maybe that is the lesson. Maybe God did not make everybody the same because sameness was never the assignment. Maybe the lesson is acceptance. Maybe the lesson is humility. Maybe the lesson is compassion. Maybe the lesson is learning how to love people who are different from us without trying to erase them first. Maybe the difference was never the threat. Maybe the real test is whether we can stay loving in the presence of difference. Because everybody wants grace for themselves. Everybody wants people to understand where they're coming from. Everybody wants patience when they're hurting, when they're growing, when they're confused, or trying to figure life out. But then some of those same people turn around and refuse the same humanity to others. That's not spiritual maturity. That is ego in them church clothes. Let's talk a little bit of psychology, because I always got to throw that in there, because this card is full of it. A lot of people attack in others what they have never made peace within themselves. Difference challenges their worldview. Difference creates uncertainty. Difference stretches them beyond their comfort zone. And some people, they'd rather judge than to grow. Because judgment, well, that's easy. Judgment gives people a cheap hit of feeling superior. It lets them feel certain without being compassionate. And it lets them perform goodness instead of living it. It lets them avoid the harder work of humility, curiosity, and actual love. That's why some people are addicted to outrage. It makes them feel powerful without requiring transformation. But love costs you something. Love requires humility. It requires listening. And it requires sitting with complexity. Love, it requires admitting that you do not know everything. Love requires caring about another human being more than you care about your own image of being right. That's the real test. And honestly, people care way too much about what the crowd says. What will people think? What will the church say? What will my family say? What will my friends say? What will social media say? What will the loudest fool in the room say? It gets really simple when you stop all that noise. Just look into your own heart. I mean, really look. When have you needed grace? When have you felt misunderstood? When have you needed someone to be by your side? When have you prayed that somebody would see your heart and not just your struggle? That's where the truth starts getting clear, because it hurts when it's done to you. Why are you so eager to do it to somebody else? And that's where I keep landing. Maybe the lesson was never to make everybody the same. Maybe the lesson was to become loving enough to handle how beautifully different we all are. Maybe the world is not becoming more evil. Maybe the world is being given more chances to become more loving. Maybe what is becoming acceptable is not morality. Maybe it's unnecessary cruelty. Maybe more people are finally saying, no, I will not keep hurting my child to protect my discomfort. No, I will not keep rejecting my loved one because somebody taught me to. No, I will not keep confusing someone else's differences with a moral emergency. No, I will not keep making people afraid and calling that righteousness, because fear is not of God. Anxiety is not of God. Shame, that's not of God. Making people feel terrified to be honest is not of God. Driving people into isolation and then calling it holy, not of God. Love is. Support is. Compassion is. Mercy is. And in a world already full of hate, maybe the holiest thing you can do is stop adding to it. Because some of the meanest people you will ever meet know scripture. Some of the coldest people you will ever meet know how to say, I'm praying for you. Some of the most spiritually arrogant people you will ever meet know all the right words and none of the right fruit. Because love, it does not look like humiliation. Love does not look like bullying. Love does not look like stripping people of dignity. Love does not look like making someone feel ashamed for existing. Love does not need to degrade somebody to defend God. And faith, that cannot make room for compassion, is not deep. Faith, I will say it again. Faith that cannot make room for compassion is not deep. It's performance. Jesus was not here building his ministry on mockery and shame. He was not famous for punching down. He was not known for making vulnerable people feel smaller. Don't make the vulnerable feel small. He was known for compassion, for sitting with people, for loving the people that others judged, for seeing the human first. And if somebody does not believe in Jesus at all, the truth still matters at a human level. Because what kind of world do we want? One where people feel less alone, or one where people have to hide to survive? That's the T. Not everybody who talks about God reflects God. Not everybody who claims spirituality is safe. And not everybody who says they love people actually knows how to love people. Some people are just spiritual haters, threatened by your light, threatened by your honesty, threatened by your freedom, threatened by your softness, threatened by your healing, threatened by your magic, threatened by your power, threatened by your refusal to shrink just because the world view is too brittle to hold your existence. But hear me clearly. Hear me clearly. Their judgment does not define your worth. Their prejudice does not cancel your sacredness. Their discomfort does not make you wrong. Their rejection does not get the final word over your life. In a world this heavy with hate, be the one who makes someone feel less alone. Be the one who chooses understanding over performance. Be the one who does not need someone else to feel ashamed in order to feel holy. Be the one who remembers that being human should still mean something. Because most people, they don't need more judgment. They need to know they are still worthy of love. That's the T. Maybe the lesson was never to make everybody the same. Maybe the lesson was to become loving enough to handle how beautifully different we all are. If your version of holiness requires someone else to feel ashamed for existing, that's not love. That's control. And not everybody who says Jesus carries his spirit. Some people, they're just adjusting his name to baptize their bias. Difference is not the danger. The danger is a heart so rigid it cannot make room for compassion. It gets real simple when you look in your heart. Most people don't need more judgment. They need to know they're not alone.